My very first encounter with diabetes was when my grandmother had been diagnosed. That was back in the late 50s. And I remember my brother and I always going over there and spending the weekend and watching her every morning shoot herself with insulin and saying to myself, how awful that is. I hope I never have to do that. As the years went by, everybody was fine in our family with it. And in later years, both of my parents developed type 2 diabetes. And then Elizabeth came along, and at age 10 years old, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I remember how devastated I was when I heard that news and how bad I felt for her and how I watched her take insulin. And when she was very young, her mother always had to administer the insulin to her. When we'd go out to restaurants to eat, we had to make sure that the timing was just right, that she had her insulin and then was able to eat dinner. And I admired Elizabeth from that very, very young age because she never let that disease take anything away from her. In fact, it made her stronger.
My name is Emily. I am 8 years old, and my big sister Christina has diabetes.
Diabetes is one of those diseases that is a family disease. It is not something that is individual.
And when she was new at this, I would always want to help her. As a family, we're healthier now because we know more about diabetes.
As a parent, there's never a good night's sleep having a child with diabetes. It's constant testing, constant worrying about low blood sugars. She's hypoglycemic unaware, so she can sleep through a 30 blood sugar, and if we don't catch it, she can wind up in the hospital.
When we first put Ashley in preschool over at the Jewish Community Center in Maitland, Risa would go there and sit in the lobby for 5 hours a day, every day while Ashley was in preschool. She couldn't leave. She would bring a book with her, read a lot of books, but she couldn't run errands. She would just stay there and make sure everything was all right.
A couple of years ago, she wanted to go to camp, and our oldest son Ryan heard us talking that we might not send her to camp because of the diabetes, because there was no one there trained to watch her. And he said to us, Mom and Dad, if that's what's stopping you, then I'll learn how to take care of her. I'll learn how to test her blood sugars and give her insulin and count carbohydrates, and that way she won't miss out on camp.
When I was a young child, my grandmother had diabetes. And of course, I was a very young child, didn't understand what it meant at that time. But I just knew that she was always having to go take shots and stepping away. That was my first and only really experience with diabetes until years later when my first daughter was diagnosed with diabetes at the age of 10 years old. It affected us in a way that we had to have more defined times of eating and more defined types of food in order to get Elizabeth what she needed to eat. It also affected us because I remember coming home from the hospital and having to measure very carefully the correct amounts of insulin in the syringe and then making sure the air bubbles were out and giving her the shots several times, 3 or 4 times a day.
On September 1st, 1997, complications of diabetes took the life of my father. During the time when he struggled with this disease, I was not very knowledgeable of it. After working with the association, it's sort of like I wish I knew then what I knew now, and I thought I could really have helped him. But I may not be able to help him now, but I'm able to help tons of people in the community, other family members, and all the great volunteers I'm meeting through the association.
I got involved with the American Diabetes Association about 7 years ago. And the reason I did is because my grandmother was afflicted with diabetes, and she had type 1 and was constantly given her insulin on a daily basis. And my grandmother, through her later years, you could just see the complications, what it's caused to her, as she had incontinence problems, heart problems, and other issues throughout her life, and basically passed away because of complications. So I'm here to help fight the fight with American Diabetes, every day trying to do something to bring awareness, raise money, and just be part of the diabetes army.